The morning my mother handed me a severance check for $22,000 and begged me to just move on quietly, I didn't get angry. I simply smiled, folded the paper in half, and slid it right back across the kitchen table. She looked at me like I was losing my mind, but the truth was I hadn't lost a thing. For the first time in months, I had finally found my footing. Let me back up. My name is Renee, and I'm 31 years old. I grew up in Clarksburg, West Virginia, the kind of tight-knit American city where everybody's last name is somebody else's reference. My family runs a lucrative building supply company that my grandfather built from the ground up in 1974, Callaway Materials. By the time I was 25, I was the one handling the books. Not because anyone forced me to, but because I spent my nights and weekends teaching myself cost accounting. Meanwhile, my older brother Derek was out doing whatever Derek did best, which was mostly charming strangers and dodging real responsibility. I didn't mind the dynamic. I genuinely loved the work, and numbers made sense to me in a way that people rarely did. Then Derek came home from a sales conference in Charlotte with a new girlfriend named Paige. Within 8 months, there was a wedding ring. Within 12 months, Paige had pulled up a chair to every single family meeting. She gave herself a fancy, self-written title, Operations Director, and launched a quiet, highly calculated campaign to make me feel like a trespasser in my own family's company. It started with the little things, policy suggestions I was conveniently excluded from, crucial meetings that magically got scheduled the exact days I was out of town, my own financial reports getting reviewed by Paige before they were allowed to reach my father's desk. She never attacked me directly. She was far too smart for that. She just slowly, methodically rearranged the furniture until I was backed into a corner, wondering how I even got there. My father didn't see the manipulation, or maybe he just refused to. Derek had always been his favorite in that uncomplicated way firstborn sons sometimes are. Because Paige had attached herself to Derek so thoroughly, criticizing her felt exactly like criticizing him. My mother definitely saw through the cracks, but she's a peacekeeper by nature. She always chose the path of least resistance just to keep our Sunday dinners calm. 6 months ago, Paige finally made her master move. She sat my father down and declared that the company desperately needed to streamline leadership. She claimed that having 2 people with overlapping financial authority was creating unnecessary confusion. She brought a whole presentation, glossy printed slides, a brand new suggested organizational chart where my name simply didn't exist. She recommended offering me a severance package, framing herself as generous and pragmatic. My father, to his credit, looked deeply uncomfortable, but he didn't say no. Not right away. They branded it a family conversation. But walking into that room felt like receiving a guilty verdict. I drove home from that meeting with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white, my jaw locked tight with pure frustration. I could have broken down crying. I could have called Derek and screamed into the phone. Instead, I walked into my empty apartment, brewed a strong pot of coffee, and cracked open my laptop. Because here's the fatal flaw in Paige's brilliant little corporate takeover. She forgot one crucial detail. I was the one who actually knew what was buried in those books. For 3 agonizing weeks, I scrubbed through 4 entire years of our financial records, quietly, methodically. I work the way you do when you aren't trying to make a scene, but rather when you're trying to build an airtight cage. And what I uncovered didn't make me angry. It made me go absolutely terrifyingly still. There were major vendor accounts that didn't add up. Massive payment approvals were being secretly routed through a shell company registered in Delaware, a company with 0 physical address. I found heavy invoices for building materials that our warehouse manager, a loyal guy I'd known since I was 12, swore to me he had never received. Individually, the discrepancies were small enough to slip under the radar, but across 4 years, they totaled just over $240,000. I documented every single cent. I didn't take this nuclear bomb to my father. I took it straight to an attorney. Her name was Sylvia Okafor, operating out of a sharp office in Morgantown that smelled like expensive coffee and heavy law books. I laid the entire web of deceit out on her desk, the vendor irregularities, the shady routing patterns, the undeniable timeline. Sylvia read through my towering stack of evidence without a single change in expression. When she finally finished, she folded her hands, looked me dead in the eye, and delivered the kind of icy calm that professionals reserve for serious danger. She told me I had more than enough to trigger a devastating forensic audit. Better yet, she explained that if the auditors confirmed my documentation, we weren't just looking at an internal family dispute. We were looking at federal wire fraud charges. I asked Sylvia what my next moves were. She gave me two options. Option 1, I could bring this to the family behind closed doors and let them handle their own mess. Option 2, I could hand the files directly to the authorities and let the criminal justice process completely destroy her. Sylvia made it crystal clear she had my back either way, but warned me that once I reported this externally, there was no hitting the undo button. I sat in silence with that weight for a very long time. I'll be brutally honest with you. A huge part of me wanted to kick open the door to my parents' house, slam that heavy folder onto the kitchen table, and watch the smugness drain out of Paige's face in real time. I wanted the cinematic, screaming drama. But the louder, smarter part of me, the woman who had poured her life into building something real for that company, just wanted the pure, undeniable truth exposed. Whatever chaos followed was simply the cost of doing business. I showed up at my parents' house on a random Tuesday evening, unannounced. My mother opened the door, looking completely startled. My father was sitting quietly in the living room. Derek and Paige happened to be visiting too, which was a wild stroke of luck I hadn't planned for, but I certainly wasn't going to let it stop me. I walked in, sat down, dropped the thick folder onto the center coffee table, and kept my voice dangerously level. Before anyone in this room says another word about my severance, I said, I think you need to read this. The room instantly dropped into a suffocating silence. It was the kind of quiet that has real, physical weight to it. My father reached out and picked up the folder. He started to read, slowly. As he turned each page, all the color drained from his face, replaced by a gradual, sickening realization of what he was looking at. Derek leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the numbers. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes locked entirely on Paige. She didn't look confused, and right there. That was the ultimate tell. An innocent person would have leaned forward, eyes wide with panic, demanding to know what was going on. They would have been grabbing for the pages. Instead, Paige sat frozen like a statue, her hands tightly folded in her lap, staring blankly at a spot on the wall right above my father's head. It was the chilling stillness of a predator recalculating its escape route, not someone blindsided by a mistake. When my father finally lifted his head, his voice was cracked and rough. "Renee, is this what I think it is?" "I had a corporate attorney review it," I replied coldly. "She believes it warrants a full forensic audit at an absolute minimum." Derek opened his mouth, stammering out the start of a sentence I can't even remember. Paige instantly cut him off, placing a gentle, controlling hand on his arm, a sickeningly automatic reflex for her. In a voice that was almost impressive in its unwavering steadiness, she said, "This is clearly just some kind of massive misunderstanding." My father stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. Then he looked at me. Then he looked back down at the damning evidence in his hands. He didn't agree that it was a misunderstanding. That confrontation was 3 weeks ago. On Friday, the independent forensic auditors wrapped up their preliminary review. Sylvia called me later that night to confirm that their findings perfectly matched the exact trail of financial fraud I had uncovered. The formal legal process is now entirely out of our hands and moving forward. Derek has officially stopped speaking to Paige. My mother calls me every other day now, not to force a fake peace treaty, but just to actually talk with me, to connect the exact way we used to before Paige poisoned the well. And that $22,000 check my mother tried to hand me, she broke down and apologized for it. She confessed that my father had blindly authorized the payout before any of this darkness came to light, and she had desperately wanted to tell him to wait, but simply didn't know how to stand up to him. I told her I understood, and honestly, I meant it. I'm not furious with my parents anymore. They were manipulated by a master con artist, and they fell back on their toxic habit of keeping the peace at any cost. But here is the ironic beauty of it all. They were the ones who raised me to be ruthlessly honest with numbers, even when those numbers destroy a comfortable lie. I guess some life lessons stick much harder than the teachers ever intended. Paige genuinely thought that pushing me out of the family company would permanently protect her little embezzlement scheme. She was too arrogant to realize that the only thing standing between her and those historical financial records was me. And the exact second she shoved me out of the way, there was absolutely nothing left standing between her and the brutal truth.